I'd really like to thank Brendan for coming out. He doesn't have to do this, so I really appreciate it. It allows me to collect all your questions. He's going to introduce everybody here, and let's get started. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your patience. Can anyone hear me like this, or do I need the microphone?
Microphone.
Okay, because I might just get them the microphone and speak out like this when I ask a question. I don't know if it's easier to do this or not. It's easier just for them to have the microphones. But yeah, good evening. I appreciate it as we had this forum. My name is Brendan Clark. I'm the anchor over at News 2. Have been for 30 years next month. Yeah, I know. So next hour, till about 7:30 or so, we're going to hear the opinions from these three gentlemen right here on the questions asked by you, the residents. The format, pretty straightforward. We're going to give them 3 minutes for their opening statements each. And then when we get into questions, they will each have 2 minutes to answer the question, and we'll have 1 minute for any rebuttal. So they can answer if Mayor Pounds has a question that they want to make a rebuttal, they can do that. So the questions taken from you, the candidates, like I said, we'll have that at the end of the forum. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for closing statements. Here are the current candidates running right now. We have the incumbent Mayor Phillip Pounds on the left side right here. Jon Regan Walters. And we also have Scott Pierce. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is the first question. I'm going to hold this up just in case. First question to you. Yeah, we are going to do the intros. I'm keeping you on your toes. Mayor Pounds, we have the first one.
Your pay will be adjusted accordingly. Thank you all for coming tonight. Nice to see a good crowd out. When I first started approaching retirement a few years ago and kind of looking for the next thing to do, community service and giving back in some way was certainly at the top of the list. Politics, not so much. But a friend, I don't think she's here tonight, I would call her out so you could boo and diss her, but friend suggested getting involved with the island. First, I got involved with the church here on the island, doing some financial committee work. WD Law News Community Association, Echo across the way in Mount Pleasant. So it was a nice way to get plugged into the community pretty quickly. Then I was fortunate enough to get on the planning commission here for the city and thoroughly enjoyed working on projects and putting comprehensive plans together, and then wound up running for council. You all were kind enough to give me the opportunity to serve on council for a couple of years. And then 4 years ago as mayor, and again, you gave me that opportunity. It has been a very fast 4 years. It's been a great 4 years from my view. I feel like we've gotten a lot of things done in the last 4 years. But as always, there's a lot more to do, and I'd love to continue that work for the city. One of the things I've really focused on in the last 4 years has been relationship building, and in some cases, relationship mending. At a local level, at a regional level, and at a state level. And it's been my honor and privilege to serve and represent the Isle of Palms in multiple facets, in different other volunteer opportunities I've been able to do across the state. And again, some of you have heard me say this when I ran for council and when I got mayor. It's not about my agenda anymore. It is figuring out what the residents of this community want and figuring out how to make that happen. I don't come with anything to the table. I don't have an agenda that I'm trying to drive down anybody's throat. It's really about listening and learning what the residents of this community want and making that happen. So I'd love to have the opportunity to keep representing the Isle of Palms and continue the good work that we started the last 4 years. Thank you.
I'm Jon Regan Walters, and I'm running for mayor. And I'm over 55 years on the island. I grew up here. I went to Sullivan's Island School, and I was the Boy Scouts here. In fact, I was the Cub Scouts in this very building right here. And of course, back then it was a concrete floor, concrete block building. So it's changed a lot. And let's see. Okay. I guess that has on my bio. I am a paratrooper. I was in the 82nd Airborne, and I was, got master parachutist, and I served 30 years in the Army, and retired as a colonel. And I've been to Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and had some memorable experiences from all those places. And I'll end it on that.
Well, I want to thank Brandon, I want to thank the Illinois News, I want to thank everybody for coming here, and I also want to thank the candidates for coming to the forum. My name is Scott Pierce, and I'm running for mayor because I believe the Isle of Palms deserves a leadership that is all about the residents, about respect, and about results. We face challenges because of the explosive growth on the other side of the bridge, and it's taxing us in our traffic. We have aging infrastructure, we have a lot of things going on with the finances as far as we're not, we've got, all right, back to the traffic. We've got this significant erosion, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the stress on our public service and safety, we've got the unsustainable financial trends that are going on in the market, in our finances. But we've got a brilliant future, and we've got great strengths. With the right leadership, we can protect our quality of life and make sure we've got a vibrant island going forward. My qualifications are 40 years in executive positions. I worked for Verizon and in technology companies. I was a COO and a CFO, and I've also had large organizations and also managed billions of dollars in budget. What I also have is I earned an MBA, I'm a CPA, I'm a CFP, and also a registered investment advisor. For the past 6 years, I worked on the Planning Commission and on council. And in that time, I worked on significant projects, including the sewer. Yeah, I'm freezing on this. So I worked on the sewer. I also worked on the septic, sewer, the drainage, and also on other multiple projects. So if elected, the residents would have the strongest voice with me, and they'd also have full transparency. I think we need to be thinking bigger, and I think we need to be moving faster. I think we need to be looking ahead instead of looking back. We need to be strategic instead of crisis management and reaction like we've done on all of our major topics. We've got to get our financial house in order. We've got expenses that are trending at 55% while our revenues are trending at 28%, and that's just not sustainable. All roads lead back to quality of life. I think the council focus should be on the big items instead of the small items. And with me, what you see is what you get. And that's always, and there's never going to be closed doors.
Now we're doing the questions. I actually have to put on my glasses. Y'all made me put on my readers. First time in all. The first question, Mr. Walters. The Isle of Palms Fire Department has lost 12 members of the department this year alone. Other local departments are able to pay more with more room for advancement and incentives. What is this city's plan to recruit and retain fire personnel, and how will you pay for it? Would you consider a tax increase?
Well, I'm not for any tax increases unless we absolutely have to do it. But we obviously need to get our first responders paid appropriately. Now, you got to keep in perspective. This is not a new thing. We've always been at the bottom of the rung because we are a small kind of. It's a starting job for people, and once they get they either move up in the system there, or they end up going to some other place, because we are like Sullivan's Island, a very small community. We don't have the resources that Mount Pleasant, Charleston, and Moncks Corner, all these bigger cities have a lot more resources to pay people. But we do need to make a better effort, and maybe we should do some things like maybe try and find some housing for them on the island. That would be a good step in the right direction. Because then a young guy with a small family can live on the Isle of Palms you might stay a little longer. But ultimately, unless they're on the track to be the fire chief eventually, then they are probably not going to stay with us their entire career. And that's just the realities of being on a small island with a small budget. And okay, and I also think that all of our city employees should get a CPI increase every year. That way, at least it'll keep them from falling behind any further.
Mr. Pierce.
Well, first of all, I think we need to recognize that public safety is our #1 place for investment in the community here. If we don't have the public safety, we don't have anything. But what I find kind of interesting and disturbing at the same time is that we're finding out about this problem in social media. And that tells me that we're not ahead of it. We should be ahead of our pay and compensation, and I think what we've also got to do is we've got to take a look at our pay structures and the whole comp plan entirely. So if you look at our comp plan compared to, say, Mount Pleasant's or some of the others, what you're going to find out is that we don't have incentives. Our brackets are not the same. We don't have pay for other services like their time and service, and we've got to make sure that we're benchmarking against others. As far as a tax increase, I'm not for a tax increase, and I'll tell you why. You can only raise taxes based on CPI and on population growth. We don't have population growth here, and the CPI is back down to 2%. So I'm totally against the tax increase. I think we've got other places that we can fund items, like we pay $800,000 a year in IT services. We also have $1.1 million that we send over to the Explore Charleston organization for advertising to basically bring more people here. I think we've got a lot of places that we can find money to fund additional pay.
So this has been a bit of an arms race for municipalities in the last few years. We've done 2 wage studies ourselves in the last 4 years and raised salaries pretty significantly for our public safety folks and for the rest of our employees. We've got a 3rd study underway that we'll hopefully have by the end of this year, and we'll probably be making some additional adjustments as well. You know, how do we get to this point so quickly after we just did 2 studies and now we have a 3rd one? You know, I think we're going to have to get creative in what we're doing, whether it's a housing allowance, whether it's a car allowance, whether it's a gas allowance, or incentive pay of some form or fashion, or retention bonuses. It has been something going on across the state and across the country with public safety folks trying to retain and recruit those folks to stay on your staff. And Jon Regan's point, you know, we're a small organization, and you know, opportunities for advancement are limited. We do at least have a water rescue, and now we're doing mutual aid service, which can give our folks an opportunity to train differently and work with different agencies. But I really think going forward, we're going to have to get creative in what we're doing with regard to pay. We can't just keep chasing all the other organizations around the Low Country. And again, this is a nationwide problem that's going on, but we've got, you know, the opportunity here, you know, to take care of our folks. We've got one of our finest in the back of the room tonight that's been with us for a lot of years, and they give a lot to this community, and we need to get back to them at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is our 2nd question. This is an issue, a big issue for people on the Phillip Pounds. I know this. The question is, what are your plans for dealing with beach erosion and restoration on Phillip Pounds in both short and long term? How do you feel the city has done in the past, and what do you feel about the 2nd study that was presented just last week? Start with you, Mr. Pierce.
I'm going to start with the 2nd study. So it took us about 1.5 years to almost 2 years to get, first of all, approval to get the 2nd study, and then secondly, to have it delivered. What that 2nd study told us is that we've been on, in my opinion, a bit of the wrong path. We have not had a beach management plan in place. It also told us, or at least it told me, that I think we need to get additional resources on board. The firm that we are using now, I think we should augment them with professional engineers. We don't have professional engineers on our account right now, and unfortunately what's happening is we've been in a 3-year aggressive erosion cycle, and we're throwing $500,000 Band-Aids at it to try to repair our beach. That's not working, and I think we've been in sort of the insanity loop of just throwing good money after bad. We need a management plan like Hilton Head has. They're doing their beach renourishment right now, and they're already planning their next one. We do not have a beach management plan. If anybody tells you we do, it's not necessarily where we are. So I think we've got to get proactive. We've got a $32 million renourishment that we're right now. And I think we've got to really look at alternatives for people who are going to manage that project to make sure that that money doesn't end up in the same place that our money has in the last few years. We have spent $6 million out of our beach fund in the last 2 years. Only $3 million of it made it to the beach, and another $1 million was paid to our consultants. I think they're good. I think they've done some good work for us. But I think this next project, I would be very hesitant to put $32 million in the hands to renourish our beach. One other thing I think that people need to know, we just had a bag, 1,200 bag emergency fund released to protect 3 places on the island, and we only made it to 2 places, and so now we've got homes that are actually threatened. I think we've got to get out of this and get into a proactive mode.
Mayor Pounds.
Right, there was a lot in that question.
Yeah, there was.
A lot of pieces. You know, we're on a barrier island, and there were inlets on each side, and it is going to ebb and flow just like it has for a lot of years. And you know, the city has spent about $4 million on emergency work between sandbags and scraping and bringing sand in. And fortunately or unfortunately, one of the hazards of doing these big beach renourishments is it takes about 9 months to even get a permit in. It's not like, you know, our building permit that you can go online, click a couple buttons, and you're in. It costs the city about $600,000 to even do a permit, and then it's about a year-long wait process, unfortunately. A lot of acronym agencies around the state and federally have to approve it, and it's just a slow process. I'd love to move faster. Scott and I both came out of corporate America, and you're used to, you know, kind of saying go left and you go left, and you're used to giving orders and you go left or right either way, and it's just a lot of people around every post hole that you're digging, whether it's a drainage project, a sewer project, a beach. You know, I think we put a beach ad hoc committee in place a couple of years ago. They had some residents involved, we had council members involved, and I think we made significant progress in talking to other communities, lawyers, other coastal engineers, other folks in North Carolina. I mean, we kind of kicked over every stone, if you will. And I think we do have a decent plan that came out of that beach ad hoc meeting. We've got what a beach profile looks like, what erosion assumptions are, what triggers are in place, how quick we want to do a next renourishment. We put together a financial model that shows the staggering cost on these beach renourishment projects. We put together some revenue ideas to try to plug the holes. It is not a short-term effort by any stretch, and it is a long-term grind to figure out how to pay for some of these. You know, we're at the state begging and pleading and pushing hard to get money to help us with our next beach renourishment.
I've been here for 55 years, and I remember when all the way from Breach Inlet to Louise Inlet was all good beach. I mean, very wide beaches. And now the cycle started with beach renourishment after Hurricane Hugo. And with every one of those, we've gotten deeper and deeper into the problem. I think what we need to do is, yes, we need to any of the houses and places that are endangered, we need to do something to keep them from falling into the sea, or give them government money to pay the people for their properties. But what we've got to do is we've got to go back to nature. I mean, when nature puts the sand there, it stays. When you put breach renourishment up there, it's gone in a matter of weeks sometimes. You've got to go back to what used to work and so like right there, all this beach renourishment that's gone to Ball Dunes has done nothing. It's just, but except for it does have an unintended consequence. For instance, the Citadel Beach House used to have a big rock outcropping up there, you know, a pile of rocks and a steep stairway up to the beach house. Well, now the sand, it's all covered with sand because the beach renourishment filled in the big rocks, and now they've got dunes, and then you walk out into the after the dunes. You know, you get the lawn, you go to the dunes, and once you go through the dunes, you're out on the beach. No steps down or anything else. Now on the breach inlet end, when the breach inlet went straight out, which it used to do, during that whole time it was accreting on the Isle of Palm side, and then it was accreting a sandbar that went all the way in front of Sullivan's Island. once that, it got closed up totally, Rich Inlet did, then that's when, we started having these problems with the erosion. And we need to be asking our engineers, what happens if we,
Mr. Walters, time.
okay,
Thank you.
talk to me afterwards and I'll tell you the rest of it. And send an engineer with me.
Councilman Pierce had a rebuttal.
A little bit of a rebuttal, and Phillip Pounds, I sincerely appreciate that we've been together on that beach committee for 2 years, but I think success is measured in results, not in effort. And what's happened, I think, with the beach ad hoc committee is that we did meet for 2 years, but we also presented many recommendations to council, but council decided not to act on them. So we're finding ourselves now 3 years in the hole, and what I believe is that we really need to get some additional resources so that we do have permits on the ready instead of submitting our permits and then waiting another 2 years to go. We have to get in front of this stuff and get proactive. And we also need to get an engineering firm that is capable of doing that and planning the next reimbursement while we're underway in our current reimbursement.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mayor Pounds. Kind of along the same line here. Should private property owners be able to protect their properties from residency laws? Should private property owners be able to protect their own property from these residency laws?
So property owners are able to do that today. I mean, if you're within, again, we're living with state law, and if you're within 20 feet of, if the water's within 20 feet of your structure, you can truck sand, do the same thing the city's been doing. Truck sand in, lay sandbags, scrape sand. The city's been doing a lot of that up and down the island for the last 2 years. So yes, I believe they should be. I mean, again, we're limited by what you can do with regard to the state as far as no large structures on the South Carolina beaches. It's our hands are tied to some extent on what can happen. But to your question, yes, I do think property owners should be able to protect their property under what's available under South Carolina law.
So what was the question?
Should private property owners be able to protect their own property?
Yes, they should, but I think we also need to be some limits to it. We can't just let everybody be out there scraping the beach. So it has to be coordinated through the city, whatever happens. Because, if it's going to cause problems to your neighbors, it's going to be a problem. For instance, my driveway, the next door neighbor's drainage plan goes through my driveway. So, and the city approved that. But they've not been on the fringe all the time. So anyway, not getting on the city about it, but it's one of those things. And so, but no, I think that but we don't want to see houses falling in the sea. But on the other end, people shouldn't be building as close as they do also. Wild Dunes was a big, they took a big area that had never had any beach erosion problems, and they built so close to the beach that now they've fallen in the sea. And so, you've got to be common sense on when you build. And they did not do that. And we're paying for it now. And once again, like I was talking to Breach Inlet down there, we may want to talk to the engineers about making that, what would happen if you dredged it out and made it go straight out again? Could it replicate what happened in the 70s and 80s? So, would that cycle of accretion start back? And that's something that engineers need to look at, and we need to look at hard. We're going to using let nature take its course. They were talking the other day in that other meeting about cutting a slice in a shoal that's about to come ashore, and they that's the last thing you want to do, because nature put that shoal there. Let it take its course and move ashore.
Mr. Walters.
Councilman Pierce.
I have a little different opinion, I think, on this, and that is, first of all, we got to go back to the root cause. Why are we here in this situation, even talking about walls on private property? And I think if you look back in 2018, the state took a stance and changed from a retreat to a protect and preserve the beach. And the responsibility is to preserve a dry beach and to make sure that our dunes are healthy. Private property goes on behind that. So what I look at this and I say, look, the state state and the city, who also signed up for this, are responsible for providing healthy dunes and the dry beach. That's not happening. And the private property owners now are defenseless because we didn't do our jobs, the state didn't do their jobs. The $50 million fund that they used to have for beach renourishment, they had authorized $1.5 million for the entire South Carolina coastline. That's nothing. That's symbolic at best. So, we're having this conversation because we don't have a dry sand beach and we don't have the dunes that we're supposed to be taken care of by the state and by the city. So what do I believe? I believe that the property owners should be able to protect their property. And how that goes right out to their property line. If that means some kind of a hard structure, temporary or otherwise, for the time being until we restore the beaches, I think that would be something that we ought to take a look at and consider. And again, these could be temporary structures to just protect the property until we get the renourishment going. But I think right now we're leaving our residents defenseless, and we have the risk of losing homes, unfortunately.
Thank you. Next question, next subject, we'll start with you, Mr. Walters. Phillip Pounds has traditionally been made up of 1/3 full-time residents, 1/3 second homes, and 1/3 short-term rentals. Should we maintain this balance, and if so,
So that's a tough one. Yeah. Short-term rentals they were a part of our landscape now, and they pay the bills for a lot of people out here. However, we've got to live here, and we had to in the past when this before that referendum and all, we had two groups, and we were trying to get them they were trying to get them together to talk, and they wouldn't talk to each other. They would yell at each other. They would no way, my way or the highway. Well, that doesn't work. If we're going to get along, we've got to get everybody to sit in a room and we can be reasonable and make give and take to negotiate. And there wasn't a diplomat in the room. I mean, none of them did anything. And so what we need to do is we need to sit them in a room. Nobody goes home until this thing is done. And cater out some food. But I mean, we've got to get these people to talk, or else we're all going to be at each other's throats forever. And we don't want that in our community. We want everybody to get along. And as a community, we're better than that. But it's a matter of the definition of a compromise, is everybody gets something, but nobody gets everything they want. And that's what we need to do. And I'll be a great litigator for it, a moderator for it. So, all right, so they're pulling the hook on me here. One more thing on beach renourishment. After Hurricane Hugo, they had us all take our Christmas trees out there. Jesse has pictures that I took a few years ago right after Hurricane Hugo, and they had us put the Christmas trees out. They act like sand fences, but they're natural. They don't. They're more nature friendly.
Christmas trees, got it.
That could work.
Let me repeat the question for you. Phillip Pounds has traditionally been made up of 1/3 full-time residents, 1/3 second homes, 1/3 short-term rentals. Should we maintain this balance? The numbers I just told you so far.
Okay, so when Jenny and I came here to first look at the beach communities, we could have lived over at Sullivan's Island. Well, no rentals over there. So we came here because it was a third. And we like the mix, and we wanted to keep the mix. And I think what happened is about 3 or 4 years ago, we saw the rental properties go from 1,400 licenses to 1,800 licenses in 1 year, and it spooked everybody. So we started having a conversation about short-term rental licenses, and I think we got into a bit of a division on the community here. So right now they've stayed level at about 1,400. But I look back and I say again, I don't think we could have. I agree with you. We shouldn't have had a referendum. We should have had everybody get in the room. We should have had a conversation about it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So we did go to the referendum. I made a commitment when the referendum was voted on that I was going to adhere to the outcome of that referendum, and I have. You're hearing in the community now about short-term rentals. These folks, if they get elected, they're going to put the hammer down. I haven't spoken about short-term rentals for 2 years. My 2-year anniversary about short-term rentals is coming up on November 7th when the election was, or when the referendum was voted on. What I do believe, however, is that we do need to monitor and keep a look at what's going on with the percentage. We have about 39–40% penetration right now. What is the right number? Is it 42%? Is it 45%? Is it 50%? So I think we've got to really take a good hard look at what's going on with the rental community. And I think there are other ways to address it as opposed to just putting on a cap. I think we've got the enforcement that we can work on. I think there are other mechanisms to make sure that we do retain a balance. But in all of this, we've got to make sure that we do not have such a penetration that we're chasing residents out. Another 10% penetration from 40 to 50% would mean that 500 of you are leaving the island. I think we've got to keep that in mind.
So yes, I do think the third will serve us well, and I think the city's been quite a leader in trying to balance being a tourism spot and a residential community. You know, we put in business license for getting a short-term rental years and years ago. We put in occupancy limits, we put in car limits, we hired code enforcement personnel after the last referendum conversation to enforce livability issues, whether it's noise or parking or wherever it is. So I think the city's done a pretty nice job of creating the balance. The market has certainly taken care of some of that too, with price increases over the last few years since COVID. But I think, you know, we look at a report every month from our police that talks about livability issues. We look at another report from our staff every month that talks about the number of licenses that are out there, the active number of licenses, the number of 4% full-time residents that have a license, and part-time residents, 6% that have a license. So I think there's some pretty good monitoring that's going in place. We bought some additional software after the referendum as well, and hired a full-time short-term rental coordinator just to make sure we're getting all the revenue that the cities do, and that folks are following the rules that are required of rentals. You know, I also think our management companies have stepped up and heard the community very loud and very clear, and governed themselves to some extent. They've put a lot of messaging and parameters in place to kind of weed out, if you will, the party houses. It still happens, certainly. I see the head shaking. I get it still happens, but I think we've done a much better job around code enforcement and, you know, having the business community as well as doing some stuff.
Thank you. This is kind of along the same lines, the same subject matter. I know you hit on this a little bit, Mr. Bears, but since the residents voted not to cap short-term rentals, what else can we do to ensure a peaceful residential environment, particularly in the middle of the island where 50% or more of the homes are occupied by families? Would you like to see caps for single-family residences in any areas?
No, I think the answer is the same. I think we've got to monitor it by region, by neighborhood. When we saw the spike go from 1,400 licenses to 1,800 licenses, what we saw is in those neighborhoods like Forest Trail and other areas, the penetration rate went from 12% to 25%. So we've got more density clearly at the Front Beach area, but I think we've got to keep a very close eye on what's going on in the neighborhoods. Anecdotally, you know, I think we are seeing maybe a slight increase in the rentals, but I don't think that it's right now at a point where we need to be putting any kind of cap in. But what we are seeing a migration coming into the neighborhoods, and right now we're not monitoring it by location. We are monitoring it in the aggregate, and I think when we had heat maps. We used to, on the planning commission, we had zones within the island, and we were looking at that penetration not only by homes, but by bedrooms. And I think we need to reinstate that to make sure that we're keeping an eye on what's going on within the neighborhoods.
Caps.
Yes.
Caps.
Yeah.
Single-family residences.
Yeah, I mean, my stance has been pretty consistent on this topic since we first started talking about it. I'm not in favor of a cap. I feel like the market, with our help, can take care of itself to some extent. With Scott, I think we absolutely need to monitor. We need to enforce very hard around the rules and ordinances that are in place on our books. We need to look at the monthly report if we need additional slicing and dicing. I think our software that we're using on the city for short-term rental monitoring can help us do that. But I think the city's done a good job of monitoring, reporting, making sure we've got the revenue that's associated with that. So again, I just think we continue to keep an eye on it. If we need to beef up our enforcement staff, I think we put some additional resources there if we hear from the community that we're not covering all the pieces that we need to.
Mr. Walters, you got an extra question? Would you like to see caps for single-family residences?
If we can keep it, if we keep it at a percentage, then that's fine. But if we, but we don't want to get all these short-term rentals coming, because what they do is they fuel the tear downs. And the last thing I want is more tear downs and cookie cutter houses that look like mill houses. They're all white, with white trim. I mean, I just feel like I'm in Greenville. And they're all around me. I actually bought a home 2 doors down from me to keep it from becoming a rental house. And so, I rent it out year round. And it's stabilized my neighborhood. But I've got skin in the game. I can talk from a position of being an expert, because I did it. And it's hard to do. You take your money and you have to put it in the house, but it's a good investment, and I've kept it. But we obviously want to stop all the tear downs, because the little J.C. Long cinder block houses, the first iteration of houses J.C. Long did, those are disappearing rapidly. In the last year, we've had 3 or 4 of them just between 27th and 41st torn down and replaced with McMansions, big white monstrosities. And also one of the things I've thought about is maybe we get a historic register of houses. Again, it have to be out of 1965 or older, or whatever parameter we put. But to slow down the tear downs, give them an incentive. And the incentive would be, if you get your house on the register, then you get a conservation tax. But and when someone like agricultural, let me finish this all. Agricultural and land being preserved gets a 2% tax. So why can't we do that with preserving houses?
Next question, next subject, we'll start with Mayor Rounds. Now that Douglas Carr is our city administrator, do you regret anything that was done during the hiring process? Yes, no.
Yes, no, Mark.
Yes, no, and yes, no.
Yeah, when we started with about 80 applicants for this particular role, we got it down to 5 finalists, and when we interviewed the 5 finalists, what I saw externally, and I've done a ton of hiring in my career, what I saw externally didn't match what I thought we already had in our shop. And that was somebody that had 28 years of experience, knew where most of the bodies were buried. I had conversations with many council members before I moved forward. Even the mayor doesn't have any authority whatsoever to make a hire or make a commitment or make anything. It took a majority vote of council, and that happened to hire Douglas. And the 5 finalists we were looking at, all were asking anywhere from $160,000 to $195,000. Now, would that have been our final? Would that have been our final number with them? See, I don't know, but that's what the market was telling us that it was at. And I just felt like we had such turnover at the police chief, the fire chief, our finance person that left. We're going to lose a couple more to retirement next year. I just felt like our institutional knowledge was leaving the city, and we needed to hang on to Douglas. And I think he has absolutely been the right person for the job, and has shown that over the last 6-8 months. So I feel very comfortable with what we did, personally.
I think it should have been done by the process. When you get a process, you put it down, that's the way it should go. And if what happened was an embarrassment, the way the thing was handled, people coming across the table wanting to fight with each other. I mean, that video went viral. I mean, it was a disgrace. And as far as Doug, he's a nice guy. He and I got off to a bad start back in 2000 and I think it was 2004 or 5. Yeah, 4. When he was new there, and he doesn't have the temperament to, in my opinion, because he called me up and started chewing me out. And I was sitting in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and I felt, if he'd have been there with me, I'd have shot him. Instead, I just told him whatever he had probably his head off. Anyway, but over the years, from me being invited to planning committee meetings, he and I have come to a top, and we get along okay. But he did approve that timeshare that sits next door to me in a single-family lot. And he did, and he also, he's the one who approved the drainage plan that goes through my driveway. And he's also the guy who, all these shrubs that are growing out into the sidewalk and all, well, you can go down to the nursery and they'll tell you how far out the limbs will go. And, so he did a lot of research on that one because they're all over the place. So, I get along with Doug. He and I are, like, we're cordial and friendly, but, I don't want anybody to approve any more of that stuff around me. So.
Yeah, you know I had a brain cramp in my opening statement, but I can't really have a brain cramp on this one. This was probably the most egregious violation of policy and process that I've ever seen in my career. We had 79 applicants that all followed the process. They all started at the beginning, they all went through a screen. We got down to 3 finalists. And oh, by the way, in the process of this, in the interim process, Mayor Pounds decided he wanted to join the administrative committee. Now, Jon Regan had done almost all of the work, got the hiring firm, got 79 candidates, everything was in flight. I actually met with the mayor, and he was like, you know what, Mayor, you are better qualified probably than, no offense, Ashley Carroll, the executive hire. So I went along, and I thought he was going to, in good faith, go through a normal hiring process. That did not happen. The minute he got on the committee, they ejected Jon as the chair, and then he took over the process. So at this point, we had 3 finalists. These finalists have already, they're taking a risk by exposing themselves and to their employers and coming here. We didn't have 5 finalists, we had 3 finalists. And then when we had 3 finalists, we were required to disclose to the community who those 3 finalists were. So they're gone way out on the limb, and they were very, very qualified. We had one that was an extremely qualified candidate that worked up at Fort Mill, which is now the #1 safest city and had experience with fire and police and everything else. The mayor unilaterally went to the candidate, Douglas Kerr, by this was nothing against Douglas Kerr, and said, if I can get you $180,000, will you take the job? Now, long story short, 180. I talked to Douglas myself. It's just it went way out of bounds. Totally went beyond the pale. And again, nothing against Douglas, but we lost an opportunity. And in the HR business, they call this the box and walk, where if an employee ever did this on my watch, we were going to box them out and walk them out the door.
Again, I had zero authority to have a conversation about salary. I had zero authority to offer anybody a job of any kind. And it took a majority of council to make that hiring decision, which it happened. Again, Douglas is a quality individual. He's given his entire career to this community. I have hired, again, hundreds of people in my career, and there have been numerous times where I've gone outside to see what the external market had to say, and then you come back in and find somebody to say, hey, would you be interested if we could work something out? That was the conversation with Douglas. There was no money talk involved. There's nobody else in the room, so trust me, you're Douglas. Ask this commentary and running stuff to stop.
Yes, please just let people answer the questions without any murmuring or anything like that. I certainly appreciate it.
So again, I feel comfortable with the process. Would not have been what we wanted necessarily right up front, but again, we had council approve it, and the majority of council was for it.
Mr. Walters, the next subject for the next question. There seems to be a continuous disagreement between the mayor and council members, with the vote usually divided 5 to 4. What can you do to bring our city council together so they can work in unison and more effectively?
Well, I was planning on talking about that anyway, but I'll do it. So, anyway, I drive down the road today, and every day I see this signs out for campaigns, and you see 4 over here in a little group, and you see 4 or 5 over there in a little group, and we've got camps out there. once again, it's just like this short-term rental. We've got camps of people opposing each other. And I have my signs, and if you notice it, they're all by themselves. Only little signs out there by themselves. And because I'm the only independent in this group. And I'm an independent thinker. I think outside the box. And as an independent, I can lead people in a more kind of in a better way. You know, I can lead them better, and I can also be more lead with fairness and even-handed. So I think I won't be subjected to being part of this group that I've got to stick with and do what they want, their constituents. I've got only my constituents, which is the residents of Isle Palms. That's who I answer to. And I don't answer to Wild Dunes. I don't, well, they're residents too, so I guess I'm doing it. But I don't answer to Lowe's. Let's put it that way. But I do, it's all about the residents first, and that's what I wanted to do, is make sure that, I want to try and get everybody back together and get our community where they're not fighting against each other, but they're fighting with each other. That's what I just think that's what we need to do. And I think me being independent, I have a better chance of doing it than anybody. And I've worked situations.
Mr. Harrison.
So it's no secret we're a dysfunctional council. And there's a wall that's been established and it's artificial in my opinion. I think we should all be very open and honest with each other. I'd like to work more with Jimmy Ward and some of the other council members. I think we've got a lot more in common than we do in differences. Right now, the tone that gets set at council though isn't that. We have outbursts of profanity. We have outbursts of obscene gestures. We have all kinds of issues going on that are not inclusive for all the council members. The mayor sets the agenda. So when you wonder why we don't get things done, it's because a lot of things never make it out of what I call the legislative rotary. We get something into action from a committee, it goes up to the workshop, it goes up to the council, and goes back to the committee. It goes back to the workshop, back to the council, back to the committee. Can't get off the rotary, we're not getting anything done for the residents. What I would do as mayor is I would, one, put ourselves back to what I believe to be a council form of government. We are operating, in my opinion, as a strong mayor with a council form of government. And I think that needs to be sincerely addressed. So what I would do, before I put any agenda out, I would ask all council members, including Jimmy Ward, Rusty Street, Ashley Carroll, all of the people that this artificial divide is in, and I would ask them what they want to put on the agenda. And then I would have a conversation. There are people on council right now that haven't had a conversation with the mayor for years. And when I say that, I'm talking about an outcome conversation. I will reach out to Phillip occasionally, hasn't been recently, but I can look back and it's been 2 years probably since I've been getting any kind of input on an outcome call. So what we need to do is we need to have a very collaborative council that doesn't view spirited conversation as an attack on integrity or a confrontation. We need to have adults in the room that are going to sit down with differences of opinion and are going to be able to compromise, come up with solutions for the community, and move the community forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phillip Pounds.
I think if you looked at our minutes, the last 4 years, a vast majority of our votes have been unanimous, depending on the topic. There are certainly some that are 5-4, there's some 6-3, there's some 7-2, and when you have 9 people, attempting to do the best that they can for the island, you're going to come up with different opinions, you're going to have different camps, if you will, on some of the topics. Any council members willing to put anything on the agenda that they want. We have a process through the workshop and the council meetings, and sometimes making the sausage is very messy, and it takes a while, unfortunately. But you're trying to herd 9 people down a path to get some type of majority view of where you think residents want to take you. And Jon Regan, to your comment, you're right. I mean, it is the residents of this community that we're answering to. It's not a special interest group. It's not low. It's not the vacation rental community. It is the residents of this island that you try to ascertain what people want and where they want you to take things, and then you go about executing that.
Next question, I believe, comes from up here. Yep, short one. What does the term residents first mean to
first is defined by every resident. And I think that you've got to take a look at where they live, what they're encountering on the island, and what their importance are. For some residents first, that means I want a quiet enjoyment in my house. I would expect that to be for everybody. But I think that when we talk about residents first, we should always ensure that we're not encumbering their rights on their own property, we're not disturbing how they live, and that they're going to be able to live very peacefully and with peaceful enjoyment. So I think what we should look at when we're talking about going forward, what are the major things that are impacting our quality of life? It's our beach, it's our infrastructure, it's our traffic, and all of those will impact the quality of life. When we look at any decision that we're making, all of those should be taken into consideration when we look at what residents first means.
If you think about it, it's kind of interesting to me that you run on the tagline of residents first, because those are your bosses. I mean, that's who's hiring and firing you, and we have an election every 4 years to put the same folks back in place or not. So I think everything we do has to be residents first. And Brandon, to your question, you're trying to create this delicate balance of being a tourism destination with 25+ thousand people coming over on the weekends and maintaining some type of community residential feel. And that's a delicate balance, and that's a tough balance. And to your point also, the question, you're relying on revenue of those individuals that are coming over to stay with us or eat with us or enjoy the day. So I think it is a delicate balance, and I think we need to have all at the table having a conversation about how does this work. But again, residents are the ones that are driving what goes on this island. And it's really, we have to, as elected officials, whether you're mayor or council, it's really about listening to each one of those and figuring out a path and how to implement that.
Well, to start with, I came up with Resident First for my campaign did. So, and everybody's grabbed hold of it, and I'm glad that everybody has, because that's what we need to do to get everybody together. Secondly, Residents First, to me, what I would like to see is we need to get a handle on some of the day trippers out here, because it's a zoo out there, and they bring nothing to the table. They pack in their garbage, their food, their drinks. They don't go to any of the businesses, and then when they leave the garbage, and they sometimes leave it on the beach, sometimes they leave it in the right of way. It's just a mess. They leave their car alarms on, and then it goes off, and it goes off for the rest of the day. While they're on the beach, I'm having to listen to that thing. Beep, 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 all day long. And it gets old, real old. And particularly when you got 2 or 3 cars that do that at one time. And it's just awful. So we need to put something in the ordinances that says you got to turn your car off before you leave to go to the beach. I mean, seriously. I mean, and earlier, like I mentioned that I'm independent here. Also, I'm a leader, not a follower. I don't follow the crowd. I do my own thing, and I've always led. That's why I end up being a colonel. I'm always leading, mentoring people and stuff. So I think that in itself can tell you a lot about my abilities, and I think that we need to look for livability. We have to do something about the day trippers, because it's not like Front Beach where they're getting something off of them. All we're getting out of them is trash. So, and that's where. Sorry.
And that's the next person.
I think it's Mr. Flynn. Sorry. Next question. Do you support moving forward with a new city hall, or should we renovate our current city hall? If new, where would you like to see it? I think that's you. I think you did. Am I right?
I don't know if I lost track.
Yeah, so our city hall was built late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there, and we've just recently renovated and cut out our conference room to some extent, so we have absolutely outgrown space-wise our city hall. So we need to do something, whether it's a renovation of our current one, whether it's a new one with some community event space that you could rent out and make it a revenue producer to some extent. Our architects looked at couple of different places, either right behind the public safety building, so you can kind of have a one-stop shop for residents, if you will, with fire, police, and city hall. We also looked at our large municipal lot, kind of putting it right on the front beach area, parking underneath, and office space, and maybe an event space up on top of that. So again, I think there's a lot more work to be done with regard to what do we do with our city hall. If I was keen for a day, we just had the Go Kings protest, so we're not doing that. But if I was keen for a day, I would take our current city hall to your comment about, could you provide some type of housing on the island for our first responders or for business employees or other city employees, and turn that space into some type of housing, subsidized housing unit for our employees and for our first responders specifically. I think that'd be a great add. It's a nice location. It's city-owned already. These other two places are also city-owned, so we're not talking about land acquisition. We're just talking about the cost of the building. So I think a lot of work left to be done on this one, on what makes the most sense. Again, whether we renovate or build something new.
Yep.
Got it. Also, let's see, the question was about the
City Hall.
City Hall, okay.
Renovate it, move it.
I think we should use the city hall we have and make better use of it, because I've been upstairs in that second floor, and there's all kinds of vacant space that's being used for storage of furniture, and it's garbage. It's unused space. And then you go downstairs into the building department, and you've got two girls and about two or three big metal filing cabinets occupying over 500 square feet of space. So we're not utilizing the space we've got. So, and as far as as far as the just had a brain cramp here, but anyway. No, but I don't think we need to build a new city hall. And for instance, and if we do something like that, when you build something, you've got to look into. This is where the planning has failed us. Is they don't look into the past. They just go and start building, and that's how we got. We had two lots that we bought over here on a referendum that they were bought for parking. One of them's still there. The other one is halfway covered up with a huge monstrosity of a public safety building, and that should have never been built on that lot based on without at least having a referendum to change the usage. And so our city is once again they're not our friends sometimes, and we need to make sure that we don't do that again. I mean, and what they're doing with the usage down there, they're using it for Mount Pleasant people to park while our businesses don't have parking, because they were using that, and that was the resident parking lot that and local residents still have to fight with Mount Pleasant people for it now.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Mr. Beers?
One of these days.
I think investing in a new city hall would be a colossal waste of money. And I'll tell you why. The price tags that were coming in on that were like $10 to $15 million, nice palatial offices, and we're going to be using a lot of space. I look at the number of employees that we have in that building right now. It's probably a dozen or so. We use it for our meetings, we use it for court, we use it for a couple of other things. It's satisfactory. I think we should repair it as best we can. But we also have property and we have space that's unused all the time over at the rec center. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can do there to utilize any overflow, but I don't even think we have the overflow. And then you take what's going on in the workplace right now with automation, AI, and things of that nature. If I were mayor, I don't need an office. I don't want an office. And I don't think we need to be spending any money on that. Now, I don't know if we're going to have a financial question. The other reason, too, is that we don't have the money. We've got a $32 million beach for nourishment in front of us right now. We've got our expenses trending at 55% while our revenues are going up 28%. We've got one schedule in our financial packet that addresses the headlights. And what it shows us, and it doesn't have all the expenditures in it, it shows our $50 million in the bank going down to 17 million within the next 18 months or so. And I can tell you right now, if I'm looking at that schedule, it's probably light by about $10 million. So that's going to take us down to the danger zone, in my opinion. So we have got to really take our nickels, our dollars, our millions, and make sure that we use them sparingly. I think this is a nice to have instead of a want to have, and I would prefer to invest in infrastructure. I'd also prefer to invest in our first responders. I think we've got a lot of money that we're going to need to enhance our first responder pay and ensure that we keep that function going. So I just don't think we should be
see it restriped, the way that we, to the original configuration, and then we need to get Carter on board. Back in March, February or March, I started some conversations with Carter about how they can get their beach reach going, and some ideas I have with that as far as parking on Palm. The shuttle needs to go down Palm Boulevard and still drop off over here, but it's got to run daily. It can't run just on weekends. It's not going, because Mount Pleasant's not going to stop growing. And what do we do when it goes 10, 20, 30,000 more people? Are we going to turn our neighborhoods into parking lots? That's a non-starter for me. And my plan is I'll go talk to DOT if I'm mayor, and I'll talk to everybody in Columbia that'll listen to me until I wear them down. And then we'll be able to do away with parking on Palm Boulevard. And that does away a lot of my problems, like the car alarms and everything else. But when you restrike that emergency lane, one, if there's an emergency, you can get someone off the island. But if you've got that emergency lane and you use it as a reversible, you have a cop at each end monitoring the traffic and making sure that turning the shuttle around and go back down that way, and have it going back and forth. And as the shuttle goes, if you're sitting in a car there with like 4 kids and they're screaming and hollering, "Daddy, why's that bus going past us? And we're not on the beach yet." That next time you might think about taking the shuttle. So I'll tell you, my conversations with Carter, they don't want it to succeed. They want it to end. They don't want to be doing it.
Yeah, I want to stand up. Yeah, my thoughts about the connector are, and by the way, I want to point out, Jan Anderson has been instrumental in championing the discussion about the connector and what we can do with it. She taught me a lot about traffic engineering and traffic flows and such. I'm a proponent of the 2 lanes off the connector, and I'll tell you why. Because we can take an extra 1,200 cars per hour off of the island and out of our neighborhoods if we were to restrike the connector into a 2-lane. Now, what's happened is we've had some conversations with Mount Pleasant, and it's gone nowhere. We've accepted the word no. And in my world, no is the first answer towards yes. And I think we've just got to be a little bit more persistent, and I think we've got to get SCDOT involved. A lot of people may not know, but when the connector options were being presented to the council from the SCDOT, at first they had about a dozen options that they were presenting to us. 2 lanes on and off were not one of the options. Secretary Hall was one, I think, that insisted that they put that in there as one of our options. It is the best option that's going to alleviate the most traffic on the Isle of Palms, on the neighborhoods, especially on a busy weekend. We can do other things to alleviate traffic. I know we're in a traffic question, but we can have officers that are directing traffic like they do at Sultan's Island on a busy weekend. We can really adopt some technology that can show people where the empty parking spots are instead of them running through the neighborhoods trying to figure out where they are on the beach. So we can use AI to synchronize lights, and I think, again, Councilwoman Anderson has been working with Mount Pleasant to try to get that pushed forward. So we really need to not accept the word no, and we need to keep pushing, because unless we do something, we got 10 million crossings on our bridges per year. It's not going down. It's just going to keep going up. So we've got to make sure that we find a way to alleviate the traffic issues within our town.
Thank you. Mayor Pounds.
Question specific around striping the connector.
Yes.
When this came up to council, I'm absolutely in favor of 2 lanes off. We have to have some cooperation with Mount Pleasant, obviously, with SCDOT, and those are ongoing. Again, this is one of those things don't happen quite as quick as you'd like them to. But I'm absolutely in favor of doing 2 lanes off. I just think it would help alleviate our side very quickly and allow the Mount Pleasant folks to get home quicker as well. So I'm hoping we can push that forward as we move into the new year.
We have time for one last question before we get to final statements. What are your top 2 management strategies to move IOP forward in the next 4 years?
That's a good question. I had to go first, right?
Yep.
So I think for me, there are 2 main points in management that I don't see on the current council. One is proactivity. So proactivity means we don't wait until things fester, pressure, blow. And that's what I see on our council. We have a situation that festers for a while, then we get a lot of pressure and then it blows up. So like our beach renourishment situation, we just keep watching this thing blow. If we look at what's going on with salary conversations on our, with our first responders, why are we finding out about this in social media? We should be having proactive plans in place for everything that we do. The second management strategy that I would have is collaboration. We have got to make sure that all of our council members are in the room and we are treated like a very strong form of council government instead of the strong mayor that we kind of have today. And what I believe is that if we can get everybody in the room and everybody at the table, whether it's a short-term rental issue, whether it's a beach issue, whether it's a traffic issue, whether it's going for funding up at the state, we need to make sure that we can bring all the parties in the room. I think Jon Regan, you were talking about that, get everybody in the room to make sure that we are collaborating and find that common ground before we find a solution. I believe that in everything we do, 80%, 80% commonality across the board is that 10 or 20% that we've got to find compromise on. So I would say collaboration and proactivity are two things that I would try to instill within the new administration.
Two management priorities.
Yep, go ahead.
Priorities, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. When you're sitting in the seat of council or mayor, either one, there are a lot of priorities, and it is absolutely a juggling act to figure out, again, what residents are looking for, where we need to be applying our staff and our resources and our money and our effort. And I just think we have to be really laser focused on prioritization. That is a key, and it's where you're spending all your effort and money, whether it's at a staff level or at a council level. Excuse me. I think the other thing is, again, I mentioned it earlier, I have spent a whole lot of time building relationships around this state, and those aren't headline grabbing activities, and they're not very sexy from what you spend your time on, but it is day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat with whether it's SCDOT or our state legislators here to make sure they understand what our asks are. I think we need to get sharper at, we brought in state lobbyists 4 years ago, we just brought in federal lobbyists this year. So I think we need to get sharper at making sure people understand our needs and our requests and what's coming down the pipe. And again, to do that, some of that is a relationship that's built long before you're in a transaction with someone.
I think it's real important that we do plan before we start doing things, because you've always got to have a good plan, but we've got to be aggressive too. We can't wait and let somebody else get the upper hand. I've been naive all my life, and I've got bit a couple times from not being very aggressive as I needed to be. But as a paratrooper, when you get on the ground, you start going and you get things done, and you break some things occasionally, but you can fix them later. But anyway, yeah, I think we've got to be serious about what we're planning, and that's why, like the two lanes off and all, that doesn't solve the problem of parking on Palm Boulevard, or how we're going to accommodate more parking in the future as Mount Pleasant grows. So I think having that emergency lane and running the shuttle back and forth will get us more miles than having two lanes going out. Well, then, because ultimately what happens was I'll be the one guy who's in Mount Pleasant when they turn it and they have that one lane to come back on, and I'll be the one guy sitting there. So I don't think that's a good idea, and I don't think that the engineers that we have out here who's restriped it and all, I don't think they're smarter than the guys who built the bridge. It was engineered that way for the lanes that they had, and it should be put back the way it was. And that's just, oh, I got 30 seconds, okay. We really need to have our planners need to be real sharp when we plan and thinking the next step of what we need to plan for. And let's, instead of planning for, oh, this is a big hot thing now, let's think about what's going to be the hot thing 2-3 years from now. And I'll end well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to do it. Back to Mayor Pounds. It's time for final statements here. You're given 2 minutes to make your 2 minutes to make your final statements. We did have a lot more questions. I apologize if we didn't get to some of yours, but we have time restraints here, so we appreciate all the questions that were asked by everyone here. But here's now time for 2 minutes for your final statement. Yeah.
Again, thank you all for participating tonight. We've created quite a number of resident feedback and opportunities to work on committees and to do surveys and have listening sessions, and those have been great, and it's helped direct council, and we'll continue to do that in the New Year's focus to give residents the opportunity to give feedback to council and help have a hand in driving where we're headed. I think the other piece is, I've mentioned it a couple of times, around this relationship building and collaboration around the state and locally and at a federal level. This really has to be a focus for us going forward. We cannot do this alone. These beaches are states, beaches, they need to be the ones helping us out from a funding standpoint, from a focus standpoint. You wouldn't think you have to call Columbia and beg and plead for money to take care of a state asset that is producing all type of revenue. So I think we just have to get really laser focused on what we're doing there. And I would again just welcome the opportunity to be able to continue to represent Holly Palms at a local level and at a regional level and represent this side. Thank you.
All right, so I'm up here again. I've been here for over 55 years, and I am the resident expert on Palm Boulevard. I've lived all those years on 55 all those 55 years on Palm Boulevard. So when people start talking about what to do with Palm Boulevard, one of the things you need to do is you need to have your planners get together with the people on Palm Boulevard. I don't get all the citizens you want in their big, but the people you really need to be talking about, or you need to talk to those people who live on Palm Boulevard, who live the nightmare sometimes. And we want to make this a place for residents also, and a place where residents can at the end of the day say, I'm glad I live here. I mean, we've got to get it to where it's the livability. Now, as far as the stuff that happened, the late unpleasantness here, where we had that people going across the table and fighting and all that whole situation was awful. And if you want more of that, vote for an incumbent. And there's a stark, I'm just telling you, and there's a stark contrast between me and the other candidates, obviously, because I'm independent. And if you want more of that, you vote for the incumbent, I'm your alternative. And if you want more of what we've had, false hog politics, and you'll have that if you vote for an incumbent. So I'm the fresh air that you need. So, and you're welcome to come by on Wednesday. Come by my house and we'll have a symposium.
Almost made it over to me once. The reason I'm running is that I am concerned about the future of the island, and I take a look at, it gets back to how do you measure success? Do you measure success on effort, or do you measure success on results? When I look at traffic, you got to ask yourself the question: are we better off than we were 4 years ago? I don't think so. We've had 3 years of aggressive beach erosion. Are we better off on the beach than we were 3 years ago? No. Are we making progress on the beach? No. Is livability better on the island than it was 3 years ago? Maybe not, but I don't see it going in an improvement direction. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to get leadership in place. Excuse me? I think we've got to get leadership in place that can actually work at the highest levels in Columbia. I think right now we're working at the lowest levels and we're letting our lobbyists kind of do what they want to do. We need to seek funding at levels that we've never sought before. We need to invest in grant writers. We need to look at our finances and not go off the complacency cliff that we're headed for right now. So I'm running because I do want to make a difference. I am kind of frustrated and tired of sitting and going to council meetings and going through agendas, but not seeing the big boulders being moved anywhere. And I think that we can use not only the council that we have, but I think we can also look at the residents' help, and I think we need to get some outside help, particularly for the traffic, particularly for the beach, and particularly for our infrastructure. And when we talk about going for money at the state, we shouldn't be looking at singles in the $1 million here, $1 million here. When I talk to our lobbyists up in Columbia and I say, why aren't we getting more Boyd and Jimmy? You know what they tell us? Because we're not asking. And I think we need to start asking, and we need to be what I would call hunters going after funding instead of the farmers waiting for the grants to come to us. And when it comes to the collaboration, you know, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels, and I think we've got to get back to a leader that can actually bring everybody to the table, be inclusive, regardless of what their opinions are. Last thing I want to say is I am really concerned about the outside influences of our elections right now. If you've seen the recent mailer that's come in your mail, just be aware that we have very strong outside influences and money coming into this election, and beware of that.
Thank you for all being out here. Let's get a lecture.